So I'm working on a particular program. It should be interesting. Okay.
But it also, okay.
Okay, doggy, come on, let's go across. Let's go. Come on. Okay, come on, hold on. We're going. What's up, everybody? Happy, I guess, Monday. Yeah, wow, it's Monday. Day after Easter weekend, everybody back to work now. It's sort of a cold, damp, kind of dreary early spring day here. We don't really start to get warm here until about third week of April where I live. Hey, how's it going? Man, I tell you what, there's a good bit to talk about right now. This Al-Shifa hospital debacle is just absolutely unbelievable. And it just goes to show you how just absolute arrogance and just people just don't even think there's anything can touch them. Like they're completely detached from reality in terms of having any accountability. I mean, it takes a lot to be beyond floored at what the Israeli military will do, but I am actually just, my jaw is on the ground. I can't believe that they would do something this flagrant. I mean, it's one thing to do it here and there where you can kind of justify it. There's no way to justify this. This is absolutely, positively disgraceful, disgusting, despicable, abject war crime, mass murder. I mean, there's not enough words to describe it. What's up, Sheila? How you doing? Sorry about that. Yeah, taking the dog for a little walk here. Anyway, a little update. A friend of mine who's in a little bit of a legal pickle. I spent most of the day helping him get he had to turn himself in, unfortunately. But hopefully it's going to turn out for the best. He had some unfortunate domestic issues that were going on. Just, man, I tell you what, I know how that feels when you have charges facing you, because I had a little business that was in the Cheech and Chong department before things were the way they are now, full recreational. And obviously I went through some of this, and it's very, very emotionally unsettling to have these unknowns. But he actually had to turn himself into the police today. And I, of course, gave him a lot of advice on what to do. It's his first time ever dealing with this, so it's kind of scary. So hopefully he's okay. He actually has got the better chance of getting a pretty good deal if things work out his way. So hopefully they will. We'll see. The goal is to get him. He's just a friend of mine. He's nobody that you would know from TikTok. He's not on TikTok. He's just a personal friend going through a tough time. And, this is the interesting thing. You really know who's your friend when the chips are down and you need somebody to step up and help. And, it's really nice to know when somebody will do that. And I kind of think that, whenever we can do that for somebody, if it's not too crazy, you do it, right? And in the end, that's what's going to save our ass is having that mindset, not this idea of taking everyone else's shit and killing them and bombing them and all this other insane behavior that we're seeing. So hopefully, I don't even know how the world's going to get there. We can't even decide if we like Coke or Pepsi, for God's sakes. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith. Somebody yesterday was telling me they have a lot of optimism for the future, and I was like, So I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith. Somebody yesterday was telling me they have a lot of optimism for the future, and I was like, I really didn't quite complete. When somebody, if you don't know this, when somebody, we see in the movies about this, but when somebody's in local detention center, there's a specific process that it goes through that unfortunately I've had to learn through 3 misadventures. So I know it pretty well now, but you can get lucky. The first thing you do is once you actually go to the local facility, they, of course, make sure you don't have anything on you that's, problematic. They take your shoelaces and your belt. Then they stick you in a holding area and you go before what's called a magistrate. The magistrate, well, first, when you first go there, they give you your charging documents. So they tell you what the state is alleging you have done. And if it's something like a DUI or some sort of misdemeanor that's something stupid like destruction of property or something, they usually just let you go on a signature as long as you go to your court date. But if it's something more serious, they have to figure out the criteria they use as far as your bail review or whatever it is whether you're a flight risk, you're going to leave the country. B, are you a harm to yourself if they let you out? Or C, are you a danger to the community in some way? And so the commissioner is usually a lower, sort of not somebody who's part of they're not like a judge. They're like a little, how do you describe it? They're like an average mid-level employee who sort of just looks at your paperwork and makes a quick determination. And in a lot of cases, to kind of be on the conservative side, they aren't as flexible with what they do. So for all 3 times that I ever went in, or actually the 2 times, the 3rd time I just got let go because my thing was kind of bogus. But the first 2 times, my offenses weren't that grave. It was Cheech and Chong, right, which is stupid, but not that big a deal. And they all said no bail. So I mean, you go into this thing and you're thinking like, okay, I'm just gonna get like $5,000 bail and I'll pay whatever. And they said no bail. And I was like, this rock formed in my throat. Like, what? So if you get no bail from the commissioner, what you get to do is request what they call a bail review. So most municipalities take you in front of a commissioner within 24 hours of getting into your in processing. And so you know at least what the basics are. And then if you don't get out then and there, you then have to wait. They put you in like the uniform, all that giddy up. They put you up on your little tier, and then you wait a day or two business-wise to get your bail review hearing by a judge, like a real judge. And if you have a lawyer or a public defender, they appear on your behalf in front of the judge. You're on a closed circuit camera from the slammer. And of course the judge says, hey, are you so-and-so? Are you aware of what's going on? You say, yeah. And then your lawyer will say, hey, Your Honor, blah, 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 blah. And the judge reviews the charging documents, listens to the attorney, and makes a determination based on those factors that I mentioned. And so a lot of times what the judges will do, if the commissioner says no bail or sets the bail at some crazy number, the judges almost always, not always, but almost always, lower the bail amount, or, I guess in some rare cases, just let people go on their recognizance. So that's where he is right now. He's just seen the commissioner, and he may have just seen the commissioner, which may be why he's calling me. But his lawyer made a really good suggestion. The city where I live has a very, very fucked up central detention center. It's terrible. And a lot of times these people that occupy these positions that I mentioned, even the judges sometimes, they see so many bad things because the city I live in has a huge amount of crime, that they're just sick of it. They just want to run people through, and they just generally just tend to stick everybody away and like F it. Whereas other counties where the judges are dealing with less of this flow of activity, they can be a little more lenient and the other thing is, let's face it, in our society, it's not fair, right? We know that the justice system puts away more people and treats people less fairly if you're a minority. And so if you're white, upper class, you have money, you get treated differently. It's not fair, but that's our justice system. It's a 2-tiered system. If you're rich and you come from a lot of money, you're not going to jail in most cases. It's really unfair. So, this person is a white person. And so he went his lawyer recommended he go to a county jail, probably 30 minutes outside the city where he was being, where the warrants were. And it turns out that was a great call because he got to see a commissioner there, not within 24 hours, but within 2 hours. And so he just went before the commissioner. I got to find out what they said. If they gave him a recog, which means he just signed himself out with agreements to go to court, he's free to go. I'm going to go pick him up. It's about an hour away, though. That kind of sucks. But I'm happy for him. But if he got bail, if that was set by the commissioner and he's okay with it, then you just pay the bail bondsman, or you pay the bond. What a bond is, they sometimes will set bail on what's called cash bond. And I'm not an attorney, but I probably sound like it. Cash bond is where you have to pay the whole amount. So in other words, normally if you get bail, let's say of $50,000, you can go to a bail bonds company and pay anywhere from 2 to 10% of that, and they keep that as like a payment, and they put up the rest for you. And as long as you appear for court, everyone's cool. Your money stays with them, though, whatever that little chunk is, they get that. That's how they make their money. Now, if you don't show up, we've heard that show Dog the Bounty Hunter. That's what those people do. They go chase people down who don't show up to court. And the bail bond companies are out that money, so they want to get that person back so they get their money back. And what they do is they take a portion of the money they would have lost, and they give it to the bail bonds, the people who chase them, the bounty hunters. That's how they make their money. They make good money. It's a hard job, though. Finding people is a pain in the ass. Anyway, so that's the system. So hopefully my friend will either get a favorable result from the commissioner. I gotta let my dog off the leash. One sec. Ruby, come here. Come here. All right. Okay, go. Oh, Go ahead, you're playing. Go ahead. So either he'll get a favorable result from this commissioner, which would be great, and I'll either have to go pay the bail for him or pick him up. And because it's a little later, I think most of these bail bondsmen are open 24/7, so I can probably get somebody and get him out. But I've been in this process sitting where he is 3 times now, and I can tell you it is not fun when you're sitting on that. You don't know what's going to happen next. It's your fate is all in the hands of others. And so I had a really close friend who helped me out, and all I did was give him different phone numbers, and I would just call him, and he would take care of everything. And that was awesome. And that's kind of what I'm doing for my friend. I've been the center point to help him. So, when you've been through this, you know how stressful it is. So if you can do something to help somebody alleviate their stress. I explained all this to him. I told him what to say, what not to do if he goes into the lockup. I've been there, done that, wrote the book, burned the t-shirt kind of thing. So I will tell you this, in terms of jail versus prison, most people don't really understand the difference. Jail is a local facility where there's a common flow and a lot of changeover of inmates. And they can be in there for as short as 24 or 48 hours. They could be in there for months and months until their trial begins if they don't get bail or if they can't pay for their bail. And if they get a sentence that's between 12 and 18 months, many of those folks serve that sentence in the county detention facility, which is also called jail. Some people who get longer sentences get sent to a prison, either a low, medium, or maximum security prison, depending upon their offense, their level of danger. Some people, like Julian Assange, get solitary confinement or administrative segregation, ADSEG they call it. And if you're really bad, you get sent to Colorado to that Supermax place, and that is an absolute disaster zone. So God forbid everybody goes there. So like the Charles Mansons of the world and the Jeffrey Dahmers and people like that, the people that have done heinous things, they go to these crazy facilities that just have all this security. Anyway, somebody keeps saying, what happened? A friend of mine who I've known for a few years, we've gone to some different peace rallies together. He's a guy he happens to be Jewish, and he has 6 kids. Interesting guy, very smart. Something happened in their family situation. I don't want to get into details, but let's just say there was irreconcilable differences between, how to deal with stuff with the kids and work and home and all that stuff. So something went down that I'm not fully aware of, but there were some charges in the local city that were on what's called a warrant. And if there's a warrant out for you, if you get pulled over while you're driving, or if you're kind of a fugitive at that point, the law wants to go see you. So he did something called turn himself in. He went to a local police station, which I think is the right thing to do, and I was helping him deal with all of the logistics around this. So I was giving him advice on what my experiences were, kind of what to do, what to expect. If he does stay in jail for a bit, what not to do, and all that stuff. And the good news is he went to a local county, which is not in the city, and they processed his warrants there, which is 1,000 times better, because the difference between the conditions in certain facilities can vary widely. So for example, if you're in a city detention center like Washington, D.C., it's horrible. Or even in the city where I am, it's bad. You got a lot of gang members, you got people who have done murder and rape, and so I'm not supposed to say that, graping, and really hardcore assaults, like first-degree assaults, and a lot of DRUG crimes, gang-related stuff. You get all sorts of stuff, but usually you're with people who are lower income, and they're absolutely just their lives are difficult, and so they do things to economically make it, and they're just they're involved in a bad system, and they just come from a different walk of life. It's very unusual to be in my friend's position if you were to be down in a situation where that's the predominant people that you're around. It's very unsettling because it's just not your world. So I don't think he would have done as well in that environment. He's not somebody who's dealt with that. I've actually lived in low-income communities before as a landlord and other situations when I had my legal problems. And so I kind of know what it is. I kind of been around it a lot. Whereas he hasn't. He has no clue. So if you ever seen a movie where this, the scared white guy is kind of very tentatively walking around the other inmate, that would be this guy. Has no idea. So anyway, hopefully he gets out. I don't know what he's calling me for. Maybe he's telling me the commissioner didn't give him bail. Maybe he has to wait I don't know. I don't want to assume anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably end this live shorter than usual so I can call back. I was lucky enough to make contact with somebody at the front desk of this particular detention center. We kind of had a nice rapport. And I said, well, can I call you back in a couple hours to check in? She's like, oh, yeah. So we're on a first name basis, which is unheard of. And so I get to call her back and, talk to her, hopefully help my friend. So that's what's going on. But what I first started talking about today, we'll park that for a second because there's just some unknowns. And if he calls me, by the way, again, you know how the inmate calls work? So normally what they do is they give you a free call for the first 30 seconds. And then after that, you got to pay these companies. So I had to call this company and go through like a 30-minute process to get this guy my credit. It was such a pain in the ass. And the person could barely speak English. It was really horrible. But I did it. And so I have enough money on this thing now. And what they do is when they connect you from the facility, they then make sure there's enough money for it's like 16 cents a minute plus a bunch of other fees and shit. Anyway, so if he calls back, I have to take it. So if the live goes kind of haywire, that's what's going on. I'll let you know that the call's coming in. What is my take on it wasn't the Iranian embassy. It was the building next door to the embassy. So for those of you who don't know, in the last, 3 or 4 hours, Israel bombed, this is in Syria, and probably in Damascus, the Iranian embassy, a building just adjacent to it. In other words, if you were in the Iranian embassy and you walked out the front door and took a left, the building directly to its left was hit and completely obliterated. Now, I don't know if they were trying to aim at the Iranian embassy and hit the wrong building, or if that's actually an adjacent facility that's part of the embassy. I'm not sure because I didn't get enough information. I got a quick view at the news. But that's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, imagine if China in Canada bombed the U.S. embassy and hit a building right next door. I mean, how would that be taken? It's like, what? So that's pretty bad. But I have to get more details on that, so I don't want to make assumptions. But obviously it isn't good. And we're seeing a lot of escalatory things, right? I mean, this is precisely what I've been trying to message to people, that this is some real serious stuff we're seeing here. This is potentially the kindling. When you start a fire, you got the newspaper, you got the kindling, and then you got the logs. And this is the kindling that goes off before you start having the logs of World War. And it's very, very similar in flavor and feel to the history you read if you look at the different world wars that started. I can just tell you, it has a lot of symmetry. And man, I guess congruence is the better word. But I don't think that Israel and the United States are making smart moves because they are underestimating the willingness of these countries to respond with overwhelming force. They have some weapons, meaning the Russians have some weapons that the U.S. cannot stop. They have delivery systems, whether they go with conventional or atomic warheads. And a single megaton bomb. There was somebody on the Lex Friedman podcast, I don't remember her name, but she was talking about what actually happens when a 1 megaton nuclear bomb goes off. For example, in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, whatever. And it is really, really bad. Now, some of these warheads have 10 or 20 megatons on the delivery, on the payload. I mean, it's just an unimaginably apocalyptic situation if something like that were to happen. So I don't even want to think about that. But the fact that our leadership is sort of playing chicken with these really well-armed countries, it's so irresponsible and so dangerous. I just can't even get my head around why they're doing this. And who wants World War? I guess people who make weapons and who finance this shit want it, but how disgusting. I have to yell for the dog again, too. She's running around somewhere. Damn it, I hate when I do this. Just one sec, I gotta mute the chat so I don't blow you. Let me turn the screen around. This damn dog driving me crazy. There she is. Ruby, why do you leave the park? Ruby, hey! Anyway, crazy dog. Here she comes. Here she comes. There you are. She just likes to run around. Okay, enough of that. I apologize for that. I get so nervous when she gets away like that. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about today, at least, among others, is the Al-Shifa Hospital. So this is probably the worst of the worst of the worst that I've heard in quite a long time. And, you think about this situation, like, well, how can it get worse? Like, people are displaced. You have 1.some million people displaced from their homes. Their homes are destroyed. The entire northern, maybe 2/3 of Gaza is just gone. There's nothing to go back to. You have people in tents. They're refugees. There are other structures being bombed, civilian homes towards the south. Netanyahu seems like he could give a shit about the civilians in Rafah. And meanwhile, the Al-Shifa Hospital, in the last 24 hours, the Israelis killed 116 people. They just came in and just started blasting people, civilians, just absolutely went haywire. They were running over people and then just bulldozing the bodies in the piles. Just absolutely disgusting stuff, a blatant war criminal. And then, of course, they say, well, it was the H group's fault. They were using these people, all that same bullshit. And it just has nothing to do with the truth. And, This is the hard part to swallow. You hear these on these Zionist lives, you hear people talking about, well, Israel this, and then you see the behavior, and the two couldn't be further apart. And it's just so enraging to see that these people think they can act with total impunity. It's almost like they feel like they're invincible and there'll be no repercussions ever because they're the chosen people and they're the best and these crazy Arabs deserve it, or whatever the hell you want to say. And it's absolutely disgusting. You can read the news reports. There's plenty of videos floating around here on TikTok. And it just sickens me. Oh, somebody says now it's over 400 people reported dead. Wow. The last time I saw the report, it was 116. And people are sort of all around there kind of just going through the aftermath. It's almost like people showing up to a car wreck and just kind of trying to figure out, like, what the hell happened. Holy shit. Yeah, there were doctors that were killed. There were kids that were killed. There were people, tied up to, blood transfusion machines and then shot because they couldn't get away. They were, chained down. Just every horrific thing you can think about, and then some, is what the Israelis did in this situation. And the way that they've dealt with the hospitals, especially, and the way they've just completely, either unalived or handicapped or removed the staff, and the way they've come in and either let people die or actually killed them, and they've disabled the hospitals in such a way that they're not able to help people by removing the staff or destroying the equipment or, blowing the building up into some degree or, whatever. And this is the kind of stuff that Israel does. This is what has made me so angry over the years, is this sort of thing. This is not necessary to defend yourself. This isn't defending yourself. This is mass murder and unnecessary group punishment, collective punishment, all of which are war crimes. And so I don't know anymore. I mean, what I used to say, and again, I'm trying to be diplomatic when I say this. I used to feel, and I try to be fair, because I want everybody to have a fair shot at, survival, and I want there to be peace. And I used to think, well, okay, what happened in 1948 is kind of like water under the bridge. I know a lot of people disagree with that. I disagree with that, but in terms of politics, it may need to be water under the bridge for there to be a solution. Now I don't feel that way anymore. I'm with Richard Medhurst and others and people. This country, this leadership structure, the Zionist part of the country that thinks it can do this shit, it's got to go. Has to go. The entity as it's today has to change. And again, let's be clear, it's not the people, but I do believe that the people that support what the Zionist entity is doing, they're going to have to be, something's going to have to be adjudicated with respect to that mindset. I don't believe it's fair to have that mindset, because it's a hateful, murderous mindset that doesn't seem to care about the harm it does to others. And as somebody, I was having a conversation with a really hardcore Zio today, which I do periodically in the chat, and all he kept saying, this is the thing, this is the big lie. Okay? The big lie is, hey, these crazy Arabs next to us, all they want to do is kill every single Jew in the world. And that's all they want to do. They're just maniacal human beings. My point is this: when in the history of this conflict have Palestinians had a chance for self-determination and peaceful segregation from Israel? They haven't had it. Yes, they pulled some troops out in Gaza in 2005 in the settlements, etc., but they still had 3/5 of their population living adjacent to them under occupation and oppression and murder, etc. So if you care about your people, and somebody removes settlements from part of the territory your people are in, that's a partial removal of oppression. It's not a complete removal of oppression. So to point to somebody and say, well, all we got was rockets, we gave them Gaza, this bullshit, narrative. What do you expect? Imagine if you're Jewish and the Germans released 15,000 Jewish people from Warsaw, and yet they maintain all the other camps, and you're expecting them just to deal with it. No, that's bullshit. The whole thing needs to end. It's all criminal. And similarly, that's how any reasonable person would feel if the rest of their people were still living under oppression. That makes common sense. To somehow hold them to a standard that says, hey, we gave you this little smidge back, so behave. Fuck you. Like as Richard Medhurst says, fuck Israel every day, all day. They're just bullshit. So I don't know where they get this mindset from, that they get to make all the decisions in the world, and that they're being so kind and graceful to, quote, give somebody the land back they stole. It's absolutely absurd. And I keep hearing this 3,000 years ago bullshit about God gave the land to the Jews, the Arabs colonized our land. Dude, there were people there before your kingdom of David made a claim according to Yahweh that it was their territory. How about if somebody from Canaanite villages showed up in Tel Aviv today and said, hey, guess what? great times 30 grandfather, this was his shit. Get the fuck out. They'd be like, well, what's fair? God didn't give God gave me the land. I'm a Canaanite. My God gave me the land. My whatever I believed in gave me, so get out. They're like, no, I live here. Well, that's exactly the same thing the Palestinians are saying. The Arabs who lived in historic Palestine were living there. So you want to hold one standard for yourselves. You don't want to acknowledge people that were there before, quote unquote, the Jews, but you're going to hold Arabs to a standard that says they were colonizing your land. You can't have it both ways. Now, if you're somebody here who supports the idea that it's quote unquote Arab colonization, you want to come up and talk about it. The point is, who was living there in 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940? You can go back right now and look it up on Google, and it was a very small population of Jewish people and a very large population of mostly Arabs that were usually Muslim and some Christians. But that was mostly, look at the population charts, and it drastically changed. And what drastically changed? Yes, the Arab population grew because of fossil fuels and development. Every population started to grow worldwide. But the number of Jewish people in the region of Palestine grew a lot faster vis-a-vis the broader, the pie chart. And that's because people were not being allowed to go places. Jews in Europe were trying to go other places because the different countries did not want to allow them to stay in their country. That's bad, but that's what was happening. And even the United States turned people away. So the number of people that emigrated into Palestine and sort of tried to work their way into the territories and become part of the region got exponentially larger between 1905 and 1940. Just go look at the map. It's very simple to look at. But they were still a vast minority of the population. And when they came up with different partition plans, the plan that was finalized on, which is why I believe the quote-unquote Arab nations attacked, was 65% of the land was given to 31% of the population. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You think that 31% of the population would get a third of the land, right? And then you take the other 2/3, which were mostly Arab and some Christian, and they would get the 2/3, right? That's just called fair math. That's not how they worked it out. That's why the Arab nations attacked. And on top of the fact that they knew, they weren't dumbasses, when you create a Jewish ethno-state in a predominantly populated Arab region that had history and ties for a long period of time, it was going to cause chaos. And it has, obviously, right? And they were right about that. Now, the key factor in this case was the armies of the Arab nations were incapable of overcoming the Israeli defenses. Okay, kudos to them. And they push back and they say, well, we won everything. We won the territory. All these Arabs do is start wars and we win them and we get to keep... Bullshit. Yes, you can make the case that the war in 1948 started because of aggression by Arabs. But that wasn't the reason they went to war. They didn't just want to go get Jews or something like that. This is the old argument. It's bullshit. Nobody gives a fuck that you're Jewish. Get over it. What they care about is disruption, displacement, murder, gangs of thugs pushing people off their land, terrorizing the British, etc., etc., etc. That's what they care about. And as people from the H group and others have said, if my own cousin, who's my Islamic cousin right now, came and stole my house or my friend's house, I would fight my cousin who's an Arab Muslim because of what they did, not because of what or who they are. That's the part that people can't see. And they use that bullshit excuse of hatred towards Jews to try to cover up and deflect from the real reason of what drives this conflict. And granted, they're cover up and deflect from the real reason of what drives this conflict. And granted, there may be members of different groups who have hatred in their heart. I don't know for sure. I do know I've heard people say things publicly, both from the H group, which is, I think, despicable, and also from the Ben Gavirs and the Smotriches and the Gallants and these other douchebags that have similar ideas towards the other. Let's put it that way, the other, the non-Jewish. And therefore, I don't see a difference between some extremists on one side professing a hatred towards the other and vice versa. Kind of balance each other out. And they're also the fringe, right? Most people want a good life for themselves, for their kids, especially for their kids. They want to have at least a basic peace, an ability to make a living, feed their family, have culture, etc. Just live life at a nice clip. And yet the Palestinians have been consistently denied that to a large extent. Not always. There are some people in Palestine that do okay. There's some people that are wealthier and some, just like everywhere. And of course, some of the leaders have absconded off with some of the aid money. I agree, that's bad. But it doesn't obfuscate or change the crimes and the horror that the Israelis have chosen to continue to inflict upon Palestinians. And like I say, what makes me the maddest, if I were Palestinian, I'd be mad about the whole goddamn thing, especially the Nakba. But I've never lived that experience. But what really makes me mad as an American observer who learned about this 34 years ago is the excessive force and absolute brutality and cruelty and unnecessary oppression and occupation and, militarism against the people that can't even defend themselves because they don't have any fucking weapons. If you're going to stand up and say, don't do terrorism, arm the people, give them a shipment and say, okay, let's fight fair. If you don't give somebody the ability to fight fair and you cry foul, fuck you. If you want people to fight you fair, let them have the same shit as you. Let them have the same training. And then let's go at it. That's reasonable to me. But if you're going to have an asymmetric warfare situation where you have tanks and guns and airplanes and bombs and radar systems and communication systems and satellite, and the Americans backing you up with money, munitions, and political cover, and you got rocks, twigs, sticks, and a few things you can smuggle in from Egypt, what the hell do you expect them to do? Throw more rocks? Find bigger rocks? It's just absolutely absurd to expect somebody to fight fair. The Americans didn't do it during the revolution. Why would anybody? Right? So when people see atrocities like the Al-Shifa hospital, this ongoing saga of the Israelis coming in and just obliterating everything in their path, why? Because they can. I keep saying this. Why does Israel do what they do? Because they can. You might make the argument that while you think the H group has this crazy desire to unalive all the Jews, quote unquote, that they want to go in because of hatred, they want to exterminate people, and they have a willful genocide on their minds. They have an aspiration for genocide. Yeah, but they're not doing it. Yes, they did some horrible things on 10/7 towards civilians, which I'm totally against and I oppose and I call out. And yes, they took hostages, which I understand the context, but I'm not happy about it. And I want to see people go home to their families. That's fair. But I also want to see the hostages that are stuck in Israeli prison, which they describe as prisoners because they're criminals or terrorists, but they're not. They're held administratively, which is, of course, horseshit. And if Israelis were being held administratively, they would cry bloody murder. These are political prisoners. What the fuck? You hate Jewish people? All that crybaby bullshit. Okay? So if I'm glitching, I'm in a bad data spot. I apologize if that's happening. Whew, take a breath. So the anger from this all stems from the sheer brutality and unnecessarily excessive force that's used that's well over and above what's required for one's basic security. You can't claim you're, quote, defending yourself when you're killing 300, 400, 500 people for no reason. They're just at a fucking hospital. These are doctors, nurses. By the way, the Israelis just passed a measure in the Knesset, this is cherry on top, that's gonna disallow any media coverage inside of Gaza. None. Al Jazeera, gone. Nobody allowed in. No journalists in the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Now, how in the fucking world can that be a democracy when they're just completely destroying any ability for there to be fair and honest reporting because they're doing atrocities and they know that what they're about to do is beyond unimaginable because they know that there are going to be 10s and 20s and 30s and 40,000s of people either dying from lack of medical care or bombing or raiding from the military and all the other shit they've been doing where they just seem to have callous disregard for human life. And they know that they don't want anybody taking pictures of this shit and sending it out to the real world. However, information will make its way out. It always does. It will make its way out. This game that they're playing where they think they can't do it. People have chargers for their phones. They're going to film shit. And independent journalism exists. You don't have to wear an Al Jazeera mask to send video out nowadays. But it shows you to the extent to which the Israelis will go to hide their crimes. And then tell all sorts of silly stories around it, trying to justify it. And again, this is what makes me so angry. And I'm so incredibly desperate to say something nice about Israel. I would really like to say, okay, this is to their credit. They showed restraint, or they don't do any of that shit. And then I get jumped on for being anti-Semitic. I could give a fuck that you're Jewish. It doesn't matter. This could be flipped and it could be Arabs doing it. I would be criticizing the Arabs for overusing force and claiming defense when they're just murdering people. So it's not about Jewish. Get off the anti-Semitism train. Stop with the things that all Arabs hate Jews. Anti-Semitism train. Stop with the things that all Arabs hate Jews. Or at least Palestinian Arabs. They don't. But they don't want to have their shit taken, and they don't want to be oppressed and mistreated and killed. And that's what I call normal. Neither would you. If you were one of the people living in the occupied territories or Gaza, it's a tough life. And you would not see it the same way. You would think much differently. But you live in comfortable Tel Aviv or Haifa. You're drinking your champagne and dancing and doing TikToks and doing all your gay and lesbian bullshit with your rainbow flags, while people 40 or 50 kilometers away are being chopped up into pieces through bombs, blown away with tanks, and being murdered inside of hospitals, doctors, nurses, journalists. It's fucking disgusting. And if this doesn't outrage you, I don't know what will. And yes, there are other atrocities around the world, and just because they exist doesn't make this one any better. And this one deserves as much focus, if not more, because of the sheer depravity of it. It is just the amount of depravity and just evil shit going on is just beyond my comprehension. I can't imagine having any of that inside of me or anybody who I know who's decent. It just makes me angry. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I feel so helpless. I can't do anything about it. The American government seems so insulated from public pressure. You see these silly State Department briefings where journalists who are trying to be somewhat responsible bring it up and they come up with some bullshit answer we all know is complete lie. In the U.S., the game just goes on. They supply more bombs, more missiles, more airplane parts, more everything, more money. It's like, what in the hell? What does that say about us as citizens? In essence, we need to do something more than just bellyache and go vote. Eventually, it's our responsibility. Anybody, and this is what happened with Germany. People say, well, why the fuck did this happen? This is why it happened. What's happening right now in America, where we're sort of sitting back and going, well, what do we do? What do we do? We all know what we need to do. And more people are starting to talk about this. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say it very clearly. If another country, forget about America, and another country was doing and supporting each other, let's say it's Nigeria and Zimbabwe, for example, and the Nigerians are arming the Zimbabweans and they're massacring another group of people that they can. What the Zimbabwe people need to do is overthrow their fucking government. Get rid of the power structure, whatever they got to do it. Doesn't matter what the means are. Hopefully it can be done through pressure and through whatever political process, civil disobedience, where no harm is done to anybody. But that's unlikely, and most of these things don't move that way. But they would have a responsibility to shift the balance of power such that the support systems that are in place do not continue to support murder and genocide. Because the government, our country's government, is as culpable for every one of those human beings killed at the Al-Shifa hospital as the soldiers who carried it out and the Israeli leadership and military who ordered it. I'll try to move to a better spot. Whew, man. I haven't had a chance to vent about this. I've been helping my friend all day, and I had to suppress all this to try to be diplomatic. I was dealing with a lot of his friends and family who probably disagree. My friend, by the way, he works with Jewish Voices for Peace, so he opposes the occupation. He speaks out about it. He's anti-Zionist. But none of his family and friends are. And I've had to speak with many of his lawyer, his family and friends, and so I've had to kind of keep my lip buttoned up because that shit doesn't fly. You can't deal well with somebody's friends and family by standing on a political stoop and shouting from the hilltops. You just got to kind of keep it to yourself. But I would very much like to have conversations with them at some point once they see how well I've helped their friend and realize I'm not a mean-spirited person, and it's nothing to do with hate towards anybody. It's about the behavior that's going on that most people don't know, or that's being miscategorized or misrepresented to them. No, the UN won't do it. The UN is not the problem. The way the UN is structured is the problem. But it all comes down to U.S. hegemony. That's what's driving this train right now, is the desire for continued U.S. hegemony. And the reason why I think there's going to be an international conflict, and this is part and parcel of all the problems that quote-unquote ripple throughout the world, domestically and elsewhere, is that the U.S. knows, the writing is on the wall right now, that hegemony is slipping away. The monetary system that's controlled by the Federal Reserve and the London Central Bank is having less and less ability to control everything around the world. It used to be pretty much a monolithic system after World War II where the U.S. controlled everything. And all the money flowed back to the U.S. from all these different processes. And that's not happening. And they see the writing on the wall. And these elites who don't want to let go of power and don't want to relinquish that control and that money are trying to figure out a way to, to unsettle the chasm that's occurred. They want to try to retake back the power that they've maintained for decades. That's what's driving all of this, I believe. And the destabilization that goes on is towards that end. It's the same exact effort the U.S. made with regard to Ukraine and Russia. If you dig deep and find out what drove this conflict, you'll find this exact same underpinnings. And it's disgusting because no decent human being that I know who just wants to get through life like most of us want to do would ever dream up that shit. They'd be like, don't kill 600,000 people to try to meet your needs. Who kind of crazy person would do that? And I'll tell you, it's the elites of the United States, the transnational, what I call sociopathic serial accumulator class. That group, those are the people that want return on capital above all else. They want U.S. and Western dominance above all else so they can do more of that shit. So something's got to give. And I'm just telling you, I think more people, I talked to a UPS driver today just as I was walking the dog down here. And he's like, you know what? This is what he said to me. I said, congratulations on the new contract that you all got. I'm very happy for you. That's all I said to him. He's like, yeah, man, you know what? That woke a lot of us up. And now we're realizing that we've been lied to our entire adult lives, that everything we're being told about how the U.S. operates is, I was blown away. I'm like, dude, it's a 46-year-old UPS driver. And he took some time off the back of his truck just to share that with me. And then he said to me, you know what time it is, don't you? And he put his fist up. That means revolution. And I agree. It is time. It's long past time. And listen, I don't want to advocate for something like that. I don't think anybody wants to deal with this shit. But it is so far beyond out of control. And these power structures that are doing this stuff, they're not going to stop. It's going to get worse. And what they're going to do, if you don't know it, is they're going to put all of our lives at risk for their pursuit of greed and wealth and power. And that's what's happening right now. Every single one of us that are talking right now are potentially being put in harm's way, because if this shit blows up, the United States thinks that it's totally protected from any harm. We do have big oceans around us and we have allies north and south. But missiles don't care about oceans. They fly. They'll fly right over water, they'll fly right over the poles, and they land where they land because they're well guided by satellites. And we're not going to be able to knock them all down if there's an all-scale attack. And we're going to be absolutely FUBAR. And that stands for fuck beyond all recognition. And that's what I'm worried about. That's what I think bothers me the most, is that our leadership is potentially putting this in play, which is insane. It's absolute insanity. And so if that doesn't concern you, you're just sleeping at the wheel. And if you look at the tide, it's going in that direction. The Israelis are bombing the fucking Iranians in Syria. That's an act of war. The Israelis have ramped up their bombing all over the place in Lebanon and Syria recently. They're itching for a conflict. You know why? Because they know they can't sustain their war crimes without there being a broader conflict, and they want to use the U.S. to bring them in to do its dirty work and to tempt the other allies and try to squeeze them out so the U.S. can have this new power structure and control the energy resources and put down the Iranian, Russian, Chinese BRICS project. That's what's going on. Somebody says Chip with his tinfoil hat. Nope, it's a Titleist hat. But thanks for, I bet they probably make one in tinfoil. I could probably buy that, but you're a little off. This is made out of, I think, canvas and maybe some cardboard, I guess. But no, thanks for saying that. You may think this is tinfoil hat stuff. If you think that what I'm saying has no connection with reality, hey, I hope you're right. I mean, the last thing any of us sane people want to see is some of these developments take place. And I don't know what else you can draw from this. Tasty Non. Well, I'll tell you what, Tasty Non, let me see how many followers you have. Because here's what I'd like to do. You can criticize somebody and kind of make fun. Yeah, you only have one follower. So let's do this. Let's let you go follow. Let's keep you quiet for the live since you only have one follower. Go bother somebody else, you little gnat. But if you do get yourself to 100 or 200, whatever the requirement is to come up, come on back. You can come up and set me straight. You can tear off my tinfoil hat and you can tell me what's going on in the world so we can all understand your point of view. That's fair. Anyway, so it's not looking good. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to overwhelm people. I don't want to keep harping on that, but it has me concerned. It has a lot of other people concerned. I think if you listen to Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, they are wondering why we have such amateurish leadership. And maybe this is all by design. Maybe they're not amateurs. Maybe they're very effectively implementing the things that have been handed to them by others. Could be. I don't know. But if they are doing it of their own accord, they are absolutely out of their league. And I think the Russians are looking at this and like, what the fuck are you guys doing? You're trying to further fuck with us in Ukraine when the whole thing's over with. Let's face it, Ukraine is never. And if you're somebody who supports Ukraine, then let's see if we have an interesting conversation to be had. Hello.
Yeah, it's Hey Chip, how are you?
I'm trying to keep my sanity in the face of an insane world.
Oh, I hear you. So, I have a crazy question. So, back when Israel was set up, was it both Democrats, Republicans that voted for that agreement?
Well, it wasn't really supported by the Congress per se. It was supported at the UN, and the U.S. had representatives. It was a very new and fledgling United Nations. It was, there was a League of Nations before it, and just after 1945, the UN started to become an entity, and so the UN and the President of the United States expressed their support for some type of partition plan, which eventually became the one that we saw that took shape in 1948.
Hmm. So, if we were to fight this aid on a political stage,
Uh-huh.
how do we vote that out and make the changes?
We won't. We won't because the influence of the Israel lobby. It's a great book by John Mearsheimer. I wish everyone would read it, especially people from Israel, called The Israel Lobby. And he caught a lot of heat for it. He was called anti Semitic and all this other stuff. He's not. He's a professor of political science from the University of Chicago, very well known political thinker. And his 2 cents on Ukraine are great, but just look at what he and his co-author did about the Israel lobby. It doesn't give the most money to candidates, which is often looked at as saying, well, they're not that, but they have the most of a stranglehold on the political nature of Congress, such that if you step out of line, you push back against their agenda, you get targeted and you get punished. If you go with their agenda, you get rewarded and shuffled through the ranks to higher positions. And that's been going on for a long time, and it's increased in its power, and it's out of control, such that they've earmarked publicly $110 million for this election cycle coming up in November of 2024 to try to get rid of 7 sitting congresspeople, which is unheard of. That's coming. So AIPAC uses its muscle and might and its power and strength to bully people into submission. And
Isn't
it's
that
got to,
something we can
that's one of,
change?
that has to stop. Well, we can't vote it out because think of it this way. If you have an entity that gives incentives and punishments that prevent people from doing what is on their mind as far as their conscience is concerned or their constituents' will, and instead does the bidding of a very micro fraction of society that supports a foreign nation that has an overwhelming amount of money and support from a government that has no place being so, in my opinion, how do you break that? And the answer is you don't. So you
Mm,
have to remove the systems of power that prevent that from happening through the voting process, because voting alone won't do it. And there are many other influences, but that's a big one in terms of this policy. So we're at an impasse. And so how do you get past a system that's been made impossible to fix? If something makes peaceful resolution impossible, well, you can fill in the blanks on the rest of the statement.
right. What was the name of that book again?
It's called the Israel Lobby. And if you're curious about another one, it's called The Occupation of the American Mind, is a documentary you can watch, similar type of thing, but that covers mostly the media and how it's infected with Zionism and support for Israel.
Okay. Yeah, because this whole thing is actually still going on with us here in the states as well. The To decolonize the mindset, it needs to be done. It's frustrating. So for us brown people, anyway. Um. Anyway, thank you
Well,
very
I don't
much.
know about you, but I had to hold back on my response to learning about the news story all day long because I had other things I had to deal with, and this it's all just kind of hitting me right now: the anger and the sadness and the outrage and the
Yes.
grief and just can anybody catch a break there? For Christ's sakes, they just keep mass murdering people. The agony and the suffering just never ends.
Yeah, the
The
atrocities has got to end. It. I.
someone was asking about the author of that book. Let me repeat. It's called The Israel Lobby, and it's written by John Mearsheimer, Meirsheimer, Mearsheimer, and there's a co-author too. His name escapes me, but it wasn't just John Mearsheimer. But it's an excellent book, and it mirrors the statement by former Ohio Congressman James Traficant, who unfortunately is no longer alive. And he said to Greta Van Susteren on a Fox News program, he said, Greta, I have to tell you something. Israel controls this place. They own the U.S. Congress. And she's like, well, isn't that anti-Semitic to say that? He's like, nope, it's not about that. It's about the fact that they pretty much control all of the power in Congress, and people cannot do anything that opposes Israel, or they'll put you in jail or have you killed. And he was put in jail. and he was killed.
I wish we could just fix that and stop it because enough is enough. It's got to stop.
Yeah, and the problem is there's a huge power structure that perpetuates it, and it's taken a long time to put itself in place, and it's not going to be dismantled anytime soon through traditional process. And that's if there was a sincere intent to do so, which I don't believe there is at the highest levels of power. This is an unfortunate thing to say, but there's going to have to be some kind of revolution in the United States, and it's going to have to be pretty soon, or it's going to be probably impossible. And I would hope that that type of revolution could be peaceful, nonviolent, and done through things like protest and civil disobedience. But I don't see how that's going to turn the tide for these folks. They just don't give a shit about you and me. They care about
Yeah,
more for them, like George Carlin said, more for them and less for you and me. They
I
just don't.
love George Carlin. It's
Yeah.
cool. Okay, thank you so much, and take care of your pup there.
Thank you very much.
You,
Yeah. Somebody named City Slick hope I said that right, says in all caps, conspiracy theories with a bunch of icons of laughing with tears. So City Slick, if you have a different take on this, let me see how many followers you have. Up 16 followers. Slicker,
oh,
oh man, you got to do a little more videos or something like that. You got to get some help. It's not hard to get 100 followers or 200 followers. You just
okay.
have to
I'm
do
gonna
some
drop
work.
down.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you. Yeah, City, come on. I want to come up and have you talk. Don't sit there and pepper me in the comments. Come on up and talk. Let's have a conversation. I will be nice to you. I will give you ample opportunity to share your views. And hey, if you can set me straight and get me back on the right path, I would genuinely appreciate that, because I hate being off the path. But I don't know if that's conspiratorial to say that there's an existing power structure that controls the military industrial complex and big business and the media complex and the national security state. I think to point otherwise is to be conspiratorial. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, I don't exactly know what else to talk about, guys. I've kind of, just bam, I kind of had to get that out of my system. I'm walking the dog home, so I can probably do this for that. I got to make dinner for them, and then I have to make something for myself. But damn, I tell you what, I'm just so fucking pissed. It's like a big punch in the gut. It doesn't stop coming. All right, there's somebody else in the queue. Let's see what people got here. Snow Yowl. I've never heard of Snow Yowl before. Now, I want to say this. This is very important. For those of you who don't know how I run these lives, I definitely do my share of ranting. But when I start bringing up guests, here's how I do it. The rules are very simple. No personal attacks. In the comments too. So if somebody's saying things on the guest panel you don't like, just, be fair, be reasonable. Golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. You can make your points, try not to use cuss words, try not to use TikTok unfriendly words. But I'll give you ample time to speak. And if you disagree, especially, I'll hear your views. Okay? So come on up. Let's see what you got to say. All right. Sorry, I'm huffing from walking up a hill. Come on, Ruby. Come on.
Hi, Chip.
Hi there. How are you?
I don't know if you saw my comment. I was just saying it's Tina, but I'm using a friend's account. I spoke to you yesterday, I think.
I did not see your comment, but welcome back under a new name.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that they've been working on taking over like media and governments for hundreds of years. This is not something new. It's just that the public is just now becoming aware of it because information is becoming available to everyone so easily because of social media. So now people are aware of what's going on and they know that the government is not what it's supposed to be. Like Western countries are supposed to be the most democratic and politicians are supposed to be honest and elections are fair and all that, but it's not true, right? So we're only now discovering that.
Yeah, and this is the other thing. Most people, unfortunately, are led to believe, and by the way, I have some homework for everybody if you want. Tonight, when you're off of my live or whatever you're doing next, scroll through the various lives that are on TikTok tonight. Make a note of how many of them are either pro-Democrat or pro-Republican, and listen to how people address each other on these lives. And this is the crazy part. So the oligarchy has engineered this false left-right divide so that the working class Democrats and liberals are fighting the working class conservatives. And nobody can win because the money all flows north, but they have a left-right divide. So while the kids are screaming and yelling at each other, the parents are there stealing all the money. And that's where we are. So we have to first educate those people on those lives. And I always like to go and ask a question. I said, if there's no chance, no matter who you vote for some of these major issues to change, what are we to do? And just let them respond. And if you think of it from that point of view, there's no sense in voting in the federal elections. You know, some things get affected, but we really are wasting our time by trying to have a savior complex. Oh, if I just vote for this senator and this president, it'll get better. No, it's not going to get better.
It doesn't get better. People, the thing is, I've seen it happen on a smaller scale because, like I said, I'm from Beirut, Lebanon. And so in the elections, like you said, you've got like two sides, basically. Just like in the US or any other country, it's mostly left and right. And then you've got people voting for these people. And then they discover that they're not what they thought they were. And so somebody comes up and says, okay, I'm going to be different and I'm going to make a change. And either these people end up just like stealing votes from the bigger guys and not getting anywhere, not being elected, or if they are elected somehow, they become like the other guys because they're given money to change, to change sides, and everybody's like controlled by money. Most people are not about being ethical and honest and straightforward. Most people, they want to live and they want to make a lot of money, and that's all they care about.
I think unfortunately you're right. And, there are people out there who care, that they're doing things for reasons they really care about. And people that work with animals, people that work with the homeless, people that work with the disabled, that aren't left for money. And those are the people we need to be on a sort of a citizens council, not these sort of sociopathic maniacs who all they care about is making money and who cares who gets hurt.
Yeah, yeah. It's really like, you'd think that by 2024, humanity would be so much more advanced than that. It's like we're stuck in history somehow, in a history book, and we can't get out of it. It keeps repeating itself all the time.
Yeah, and I think some of the more developed territories and even others, everyone's talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum and others to be the salvation for the future to get around the monetary systems. But I think we're heading into a digital dystopia where the power structure are going to forcibly implement alternative means of transaction such that we're stuck. If people like you and I start, yabbering or organizing a protest or worse, they just turn off your money.
Exactly.
Imagine that for a second. Or they make a geofence where you can't travel, or nope, you can't fly, no fly list, or your money doesn't buy food or whatever the hell they do. It's all programmable. And I think if we wait too long, the systems that are coming will most likely make the things that we probably needed to do now almost very difficult or impossible to do later.
You're absolutely right. It's gonna, technology is gonna end up helping them if they get their hands on it. The thing is, they're a bit late now, so like you said, we have to take advantage of the time because they sort of didn't realize it was going to be this bad, this quick for them. And so if we don't move now, it's going to be too late in a while.
Yeah, and there's no easy answer. Think of it. Society is pretty complex. We have all these different institutions and systems and economic entanglements and massive military machines, just a lot going on. And there are also 8 billion humans. I mean, things were much simpler, 300 years ago. And there's no easy answer. This is all part of the predicament. The predicaments don't have easy solutions. Problems can be solved, but predicaments you have to adapt. There's no solution. There's just adapting to whatever part of it moves here and there. So,
plus they've got so many people working for them. It's dangerous to just come out and face them. It's really, really dangerous. Look at Julian Assange, and that's just one example. And, had they been able to get their hands on him, he'd be dead by now.
Yeah, I think the whole point of Assange, in my opinion, was to scare the crap out of anybody who's independent, who might want to think of doing anything similar as far as, exposing crimes of the different, empires. And so therefore, what journalist right now wants to get stuck in a prison or an embassy for 15, 20 years and be vilified and accused of espionage just for sharing information? That's crazy.
But I think his case right now is going to be a lot easier because since everybody has a phone and everybody has become sort of a journalist, it doesn't make sense to scare real journalists because you've got regular people who have their phones and who can just videotape anything and
So I want to share. I want to share a
spread it.
comment. I want to hear your response to a comment. So I'm going to say the name again. City Slick said in all caps. And by the way, City Slick please don't use all caps. He said only the poor people complain about capitalism. If you're poor, if you don't.
Yeah, so we didn't
Sorry, I
hear
had a
what you
phone
said.
call coming in.
You were, oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so City Slick in the comments said in all caps. Sorry, City Slick just your name is pretty crazy. He said that only the poor complain about capitalism. If you don't like it, move to a socialist country.
But nobody's complaining about capitalism. We're complaining about politicians being dishonest. We're not complaining about capitalism. Personally, I'm a fan. I don't mind capitalism.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch Midwestern Marx, Eddie. He supports sort of more Marxist communist society. There are different ideas about that as far as how they get co-opted, and obviously authoritarianism has been the most historical problem with those systems. But in theory, they make a lot more sense, but in practice, they've had trouble. If you're somebody, think about this: the statement "move to another country." Let's say you're a poor person, you live off of, let's say, $15 an hour. You work at Burger King, and you rent. Maybe you have 4 people living with you. How are you going to have the money together to leave the country?
Exactly.
It's very expensive to, quote, leave the country and disrupt
Plus,
it.
like,
And other countries,
someone who,
by the way, just so you know, I mean,
yeah,
not everybody wants Americans. You can't just show up and be
yep,
like, okay, I'm staying here forever. You have to apply for a visa. You have to go through their requirements. We're not the be-all, end-all of life. Other countries exist and have their own rules. So you're oversimplifying people's flexibilities that just don't exist. So you're probably somebody who's never had any economic hardship to say things like that. So there you go.
plus, like, if you're originally from a place, whether it's the US or anywhere else, why should you move? I mean, it's your country. Why wouldn't you want to change things? And, why wouldn't you work to change things rather than just pick up and leave? If you think your country is going the wrong way, it's your right to try to change that.
I just enjoy
Isn't
saying
that
that
the
here.
idea behind the democracy, like changing things?
Yeah, and so it's so easy for people to be critical of people. The thing in this country that's really crazy is people blame people who don't do as well for being lazy or stupid. The path for opportunity is very limited in certain parts of this country, and it's not easy to get out from under your circumstances. Not impossible, but the amount of work one has to do and the amount of absolute lifting you have to do is, imagine this. You go to the gym, for people who lift weights, you're trying to deadlift, let's say, 135 pounds, which is a 45-pound dumbbell. So imagine one person who's white walks in and they have nice gripping shoes and they have nice gripping hands and they hoist the weight up and they're able to do it, right? So now you bring somebody in who's lower income and they put you on a greased pan, they grease your hands up with Vaseline and you try to lift it and you fall on your ass and you fall down. Now, it's possible to lift that weight, but it's incredibly difficult to do it under those circumstances. That's the difference. You don't have Vaseline on your hands and grease under your feet, you dumb, you know what?
Yeah,
But
plus,
you don't
the
see that
system,
because you can't empathize with another person's plight, and therefore
if
you
you've
say
never been there.
shit like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like, the thing is, I've read quite a bit about like people who ended up homeless in the States and how difficult it is to just get a job if you don't have an address. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the same in some other countries, but I can understand that, like, they make it almost impossible for someone who, for whatever reason, ends up without a home, and they make it impossible to get back on your feet. So I think it's not fair for people who are working and who've never been without a job to put like, it's not fair not to put yourself in the other person's shoes before you talk.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider is if you're looking at people who are speaking about this in ways that you differ from, ask yourself a fair question. What is it that drives people to think the way that we're speaking right now? Is it because we're sort of just hating on people who are wealthy? No, it's not that. It's that we don't like the fact that it's not that the outcomes have to be the same, but the starting point should be relatively closer together. And they're not. And if you're somebody who's sort of a wealthy, well-to-do middle class or upper middle class or even wealthy person, and you sort of scoff at those who aren't in your class, you're an asshole. And
Exactly.
you should be saying to yourself, what things can I be doing to maybe look at a problem and help to make it something better for other people who are less fortunate than I am, rather than shitting down their throat and telling them to move out of the country. You prick.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Like I know a kid who was in his early 20s whose father is a like he's probably got billions of dollars, not millions. And so like he wasn't doing very well at school, so he opened up a shop for him and bought the rights to the brand for Lebanon. And he got his team to, do all the work because, when you want to get a brand name, you have to apply and they have to approve and there are conditions and, So the father's team is the group that did the work. The guy didn't do anything, and he ended up with a store that was doing really well because he started off with a lot of money and a whole team helping him. He didn't start off on his own. And then people are like, "Oh, but he made it on his own." And it's like, no, he didn't. He had his father's money behind him and a whole team working for him. So, it's
Now,
not the same
a
as some
great
guy who
example of that
goes,
is, you know who Ben Shapiro is, right?
huh?
You know who
Yeah, I
Ben
know.
Shapiro
Yeah,
is, the
I've heard.
conservative
Yeah,
Daily Wire guy? So
yeah,
the partner and the groups, he has $60 million of funding capital to start that Daily Wire thing, just given to him by other people. You know how hard it is to start a massive, successful online broadcast company without that kind of money? It's
of
very
course.
difficult. So
Yeah,
people like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin had massive investment fund backing them because they spit the vitriolic conservative crap that supports the oligarchy.
yep.
But somebody like you and I who are speaking out against it, we'll never get a dime from somebody like that, and rightly so. I wouldn't want their money, but it makes it much more difficult to get the reach that they have because you just don't have the money. You have to have money.
Exactly.
Money
Yeah.
equals power. Money equals reach.
Plus, you've got people fighting you. Like you've got this whole other group that's fighting against you because you're not saying what they want you to say.
Yeah, I mean, look what happened with Candace Owens. I mean, this is how much of a hypocrite Ben Shapiro is. So Candace Owens was the darling of the conservative media, and Ben Shapiro scooped her up with a nice contract and put her on the Daily Wire. And all she had to do was recognize the humanity of Palestinian children. And that alone was enough to get her fired because she
Yeah, I saw that.
didn't
That
support
was
Zionism.
horrible.
And
Yeah,
then she started to dig a little deeper and question some of the things that others have said and maybe look at them with a critical eye rather than dismissing them as anti-Semitic like Ben has done.
yeah,
And therefore they fire her ass. They get rid of her. And the good
yep,
news for Candace is, and I'm not a huge lover of Candace. I mean, I have mixed feelings about everybody. But, I think she's interesting. And I think she's and I think she's evolving as a woman, too. And I think some of her tougher, harder edges have sort of softened some with time, which I respect her for that. And the fact that she can see the humanity in others and Ben can't is the difference between those two.
exactly. And I think she's someone who's like basically a good person because anybody who can question their own beliefs and then change their minds is a person, for me, is a I person. I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the difference between her and others. And it's unfair what happened to her because like she's not there just fighting people for no reason. She does her research, she does the work, and then she takes her decision. You know. So she's with the Palestinians because she saw that what's happening to them is unfair.
Well, she saw the humanity. She's a young mother and she's had children. And so now she understands what that feels like. And so she imagines what it's like for a young mother in Palestine to have her young baby killed because some government decided to indiscriminately drop a 2,000-pound bomb provided by America.
Yeah.
And that's a fair thing to bring up, just to say, hey, this is a reality that I find pretty disgusting. Why is that okay? She's probably equally upset about any young people who are harmed on 10/7. That's fair.
She said that, yeah.
Yeah, and so she has a strike of humanity in her, understanding that the other is not this other horrific thing that can't be cared about, like Ben Shapiro believes. He thinks that everybody who's not a Jew is a terrorist, which is
Exactly.
pretty disgusting.
Yeah. It's the whole like you'd expect somebody who's in a position like Ben Shapiro or Candace to be a bit more awake, if you know what I mean, like to be a bit more aware of what's going on in the world and not to be extremist in any way. I mean, those are people who are supposed to be educated and who are supposed to be well read and to, I really don't get how you can be that much of an extremist. Like Ben Shapiro he didn't even wait to decide on which side he was on, It's like the minute he heard what happened, it's like all the others are terrorists and we hate them all and we should get rid of them. I was also disappointed by Jordan Peterson. I thought he would be like more balanced than that in his opinions. That was a bit extreme as well. He's like, get rid of them,
Yeah, I think so. I think like somebody said here in the comments, she married pretty well, and so she'll be fine. She went to a thing called Locals, which the only reason I don't like Locals, it was started by Dave Rubin, who I think is an absolute, well, whatever. I'm not going to say it, but I'm not a fan. But anyway, so she'll be fine. She's got a good independent voice. She may have to rebuild her reach a little bit, but she'll get there. She's very well known, and I think she has a loyal following, and a lot of people will move right over to her because, let's face it, the Daily Wire is kind of a bozo shop, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I like you said, I think she's going to do okay. She's got her fans, and I think they'll follow her wherever she goes.
Yeah, exactly. So she'll be fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the media landscape in this country sucks. It's a good thing that it's switching a little bit with, with streaming and other services and social media, but it's still pretty bad.
The problem is, I know that they've been like, social media has been removing a lot of posts that would help people form a fair opinion. I have friends in the States and in Canada, and sometimes I'll send like a link on Instagram or on Facebook, and it won't open over there. I didn't realize that governments in the West could be that totalitarian, if you want. I was shocked. Like over here, we can open anything we want, and we're supposed to be a third world country.
Somebody just said Israel just declared war on the UN. I don't even know what that means, but is that figuratively you mean? They just kind of said, fuck it, we're going to go ahead and do what we want. And they've been saying to damn the international community for a long time. They don't even need to say it publicly. Everybody knows it.
But they've been saying also that the UN is basically like terrorists have taken over the UN. That's what they think. They think anybody who's working for the UN is working for H Group.
Yeah.
The same way they accused UNRWA. I've seen several other places where they've been talking about other organizations within the UN or
Yeah.
the UN itself. So like they don't look at the UN as the
It does have no validity. They don't look at it as any sort of legitimacy.
exactly that too.
Yeah, that's the problem. Well, I don't think, again, if the U.S. is going to use its veto to protect Israel at every turn, the UN has no role in trying to stop the atrocities of the Israelis, obviously.
Yeah,
Sucks.
I don't think anybody can do anything at this point unless the US changes their mind.
Well, or
The only ones who can stop this.
Well, I would argue that I don't think the U.S. policy is going to change no matter what. I think what's going to happen is that the U.S. is going to have to be changed for it to change. And that's part of a bigger thing that's not going to probably happen unless something global erupts. I mean, I can tell you this right now, if something crazy happens militarily, that could shift things quickly.
What could you think?
That's gonna-
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
What's that?
I didn't hear what you said at the end. You said something could shift things quickly. What was it?
A major conflict could shift things quickly. That's about the only thing I see in the news that could quickly change things.
I don't think that's going to happen, because both sides. I mean, outside of Israel, of course, the U.S. and Iran have been doing everything to avoid the conflict expanding to the region. So that's not going to happen, which makes me a bit pessimistic about what's going on.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to have to put this short. I do want to let everybody know this is recorded, though. So if you want to check it out, you want to hear some of my rant from earlier, I was pretty pissed. Go back and look. I'm going to put it up on YouTube when we finish up. You can get to my. And by the way, all of you don't know, you can get to my YouTube by going to my Linktree, which is in my bio. You just click on Linktree Chip Bar, and it'll take you there. And I'm still pissed. I got to process this shit. I'm not too happy. I got to call my buddy who's in lockup right now, see if I can help him out. But I'll be on later if I can. I got to eat something, and then we'll talk some more. Appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for coming up under your new name, and I'll see y'all soon. Okay.
Thank you
Bye,
for
everybody.
having me.
Yeah, that was great. Appreciate everybody.